Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be hopping in the boat with Jeff Gustafson. He's going to share some of his thoughts on Ned rigging and how you can use it to catch more fish. And first things first, he's going to talk a little bit about his history with Ned Rigs and when it all started for him.
So for me, my first experience with the Ned Rig was back in 2016. Had a friend from Kansas that is actually a fishing partner of Ned Katie's, who the Ned Rig kind of was, you know, where the name came from. He spends the summers up at Lake of the Woods. Name's Drew Reese, and he got me on to using it. You got to try it when you go down to Beaver Lake and you know, some of those Ozark lakes and Table Rock, that kind of thing. So I go down there, catch some fish with it, bring it home, and pretty much immediately replaces the tube for me, and just is a really good smallmouth bait just about everywhere that I've ever fished. And I mean I have one tied on my rod throughout the season, anywhere, any of the spotted bass lakes. It's part of my arsenal, and then obviously catch some largemouths with it too. And as we get, you know, more fishing pressure on places, you got to downsize and use more of these finesse tactics, so you know, catch a lot of largemouths on these things too. But the great thing about in this Elite Series line, we got the Gamakatsu 604 hook on there, so we got a, you know, a little bit heavier gauge wire, still finessey. It's a 1/0, so it's not a big gaff hook. It's a perfect size, and you can reel catch 4 and 5 pounders on that. You know, anytime I'm on the Great Lakes, this is my #1 piece of equipment for catching them. So it's simple, but it's deadly.
Next up, Jeff is going to talk about sizes and what you should be using based on how deep you're fishing. He's also going to talk about how he works the bait to catch fish.
You know, I do a fair amount of guiding and fishing with people that aren't maybe that experienced, and the Ned Rig's just a really simple, easy way to catch some fish. You know, I like to use the heavier size, you know, jigs for the most part. If I'm 10 feet or less, I'm gonna go with a 3/16. Over 10 feet, I'm gonna go with a 1/4, and over 20 feet, I'm gonna go with the 5/16. So that's a good size to have. As far as it's just a little bit heavier, and if you're in that deeper water, like I don't wanna be sitting there waiting. It's not a bait necessarily that I'm expecting to get a lot of bites on the fall. I want that thing to get to the bottom, do its thing, pretend to be a crayfish or, you know, whatever kind of bug is crawling along the bottom, and it's just a lot of dragging. I like to hop it every once in a while. You know, sometimes if you have one looking at it, smallmouths are almost like a cat, where if you move it fast, they'll pounce on it. And some days that gets bites, some days it's more dragging it along the bottom. You just kind of got to let the fish tell you what they want. But it's simple and easy. You know, just a real good fish catcher. And you know, I live at Lake of the Woods, and obviously one of the best walleye lakes in the world, and I haven't bought live bait in a couple years. And when I'm fishing, guide trips, going to catch dinner, that Ned Rig, pretty much green pumpkin's the color that I use most of the time, but that is also not only deadly for bass but walleyes as well.
Next up, Gussy is going to reel in a nice smallmouth, and he's going to share a little bit of information on some of the gear that he uses to Ned Rig.
Won't take too long. When it comes to tackle, obviously a finesse technique, but you don't necessarily need to use like super light line. I most often use a 10-pound fluorocarbon leader and 10-pound braid. I like the yellow braid. This is just straight Power Pro because I can see it. So you will see, oh, that's a really big one. You will see the odd bite as the bait's falling, but I know when that bait hits the bottom, and then I know when to start my retrieve, and I don't have to sit there and you know, let the bait really sit on the bottom and get snagged for a while. So that one is a big one. Not the prettiest landing job, but we got her. Look at that. Mike's hooked up at the front too. Simple but deadly, guys. Ned, that's as big as they get right there. That's a beauty.
All right, now that that big bronze back is back in the water, Jeff's gonna get back to sharing some of the details on the gear he uses to Ned rig.
I got rudely interrupted by a bass earlier, but I was, talking about my setup a little bit for fishing the Nedsters, and I'm a big fan of the yellow braid. I can watch it. The odd time I'm gonna see some bites as the bait's falling, that line will jump, but I also can tell, there we go, we hit the bottom. When that bait hits the bottom, and then I know when to sort of start my retrieve, start shaking the bait, and I'm not letting it, lay over on the bottom and higher chance that it's gonna get snagged up. So that's the reason for the braid. Obviously tying a fluorocarbon leader on there. Don't go usually super light line, unless you're ultra clear water and the fish are there, you can't catch them. You could try finesse, really downsizing your line, but generally I'm using 10-pound braid Power Pro and a 10-pound fluorocarbon leader, and just bouncing around on all the rocks and stuff. And I mean, if you get into a pack of fish or you catch some of these big ones, I mean, you don't want to have too light a line or you're just chasing them around all day. I want to, especially if I'm in a tournament situation, I want to hook them, get them in the boat quick, and hook another one. So as far as the rods go, you want a medium action kind of. This is a 7.3 NRX Plus, so pretty spoiled there. It's a sweet rig, 2500, 3000 size reel. Just pretty much your standard bass walleye spinning equipment is all you need. But if you can get a nice sensitive rod, it's just gonna help you. Sometimes the bites are pretty subtle and light. Mikey's hooked up, and it's just gonna allow you to feel what's going on with your bait. But we're gonna get over here on this side and cast in behind this one.
All right, the next topics that Gussy's gonna touch on is number one, when he likes to use the weedless version of the new Nedster jigs, and number two, why it's extremely important to have your bait rigged up very straight when you're Ned rigging.
All right, so in addition to the just regular Ned style jig head, we've also got a weedless version. So you can see two little titanium weed guards. So they're gonna, always kind of go back in place. If you catch a fish, they're not gonna get all bent and messed up. They're pretty durable. So if you're, really in around some snaggy stuff, like outside of grass, around some trees, even if it's really snaggy rock, that'll help save a few jigs. But it's still, not gonna take the finesse element away from the jig. One of the things when you're rigging up, and I mean this goes for any soft plastic, you want to make sure that the bait is nice and straight on the jig head. So if the plastic's not straight on the jig, if it's bent or kinked up or anything, what happens is the bait's gonna like twist, twirl when you're reeling it in, and it's gonna twist your line up. That's the worst thing, and then it's also not gonna look natural. So when you rig up some plastic, you want it to be nice and straight on your jig. I rig up so many of these, I'm pretty good at it now, but sometimes you just gotta measure where you want that hook to come out. But if it's on there and it looks like that, or it's bent or kinked or twisted, you're really not going to get that many bites on it, and it's going to twist your line all up and give you some problems. So make sure those baits are rigged on there nice and straight. Usually I'll take a dab of super glue and just put a little bit of glue up on the collar, and then that's really, between that and the little keeper, the wire keeper that's on these jigs, it's going to hold the bait on nice, and you can catch a bunch of fish on it. So that's they're very important. Rig that thing up nice and straight.
Now Gussy's gonna share a few of his thoughts on color when it comes to the head of your Ned rig.
When it comes to colors of the Nedster jigs, they're actually, there's a variety. So you got black, green pumpkin, brown, chartreuse, and for me, I'm usually using the green pumpkin or the black, keep it natural. I have buddies that love the chartreuse one. Mike was saying in the metro area around Minnetonka that a lot of the guys like the chartreuse one. For bass, the walleye guys like the chartreuse. So, it's a target. It's gonna stand out with your bait down there. When it comes to baits, just a lot of the Ned style baits, little crayfish imitators. You know, it's finesse, but you can, you know, still catch a lot of big fish and a lot of different species on them. But get those baits on there nice and straight. That's important, and you really can't go wrong. You put these things in front of some bass, they're gonna bite them.
Well, that's about all we got for you in this video. Special thanks to Gussy for sharing a bunch of really good advice in this one. You know, Ned Rigs really got popular for bass, you know, several years ago, and now it seems like they're getting popular for walleyes. So no matter what you're chasing, have a Ned Rig tied on. And if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, make sure to hit that little red subscribe button down below, because we have a lot more awesome content coming in the future. And until then, we will see you in the next one.